It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the films of July 15th, 1994. We got 4 movies to look at today, so let's go ahead and jump on into it. And we'll start off with the biggest new release of the weekend, and that is Arnold Schwarzenegger and James Cameron reuniting for the first time since Terminator 2 with their action comedy with Jamie Lee Curtis, that is True Lies. Of course, this movie was a big deal for a number of reasons. Of course, James Cameron, coming off of the success of Terminator 2. More importantly, for Arnold Schwarzenegger, it was a huge step in the right direction following last year's failure that was Last Action Hero, which, I don't know, which it wasn't a bad movie, but it certainly was a huge financial failure. But then again, you open it on a weekend after Jurassic Park, that's going to happen. But this time around, this turned out to be a much bigger success, and it is a great movie, too. Arnold Schwarzenegger's great in this. Jamie Lee Curtis, these two have a good connection playing the husband and wife in this. You got a great cast, also includes Tom Arnold, Tia Carrere from Wayne's World, Bill Paxton, Elijah Dushku in one of her early roles, Charlton Heston, Grant Heslov, of course went on to produce many films with George Clooney. It's just a fun movie, man. It's a movie that has just so much there that's great. The action is spectacular, the elements of comedy meshed in there. It's very good. The visual effects are very nicely done. This is actually the first movie that cost $100 million to make, which is hard to believe, especially when you consider Jurassic Park had come out the year before. But this was the first one that cost $100 million to make, which is really something to say after almost 30 years. And I mean, it's really just a ton of fun all around. It's a film that you can go back to every year or so, watch it again, and you'll never get really disappointed by it because it just has that lasting power. It's a film that's so much fun to watch. It was a great summer movie that just still holds up after all these years. And it's hard to believe that they've never put this out on Blu-ray. This is one of those movies that we've been waiting for a proper Blu-ray release, and it's just never come. And the only way you've been able to get it is through not really bootleg copies, but like burn-on-demand copies, Like, I have one that I got a couple of years ago that was a burn-on-demand from Sneaky Tuna, which actually looks pretty nice considering it is a burn-on-demand title, but, apparently there's one coming. As of the day I'm recording this, January 12th, 2023, there's a new TV series coming out, and supposedly there's a 4K version of this coming out soon, so, keep your fingers crossed, and maybe we'll actually have it, but, like I said, True Lies, great movie, and one of James Cameron's best movies, honestly. It's a movie that I can keep going back to, never get tired of it, just a fantastic film all around. So, that's True Lies. Let's move on to the next movie. That movie is Disney's Angels in the Outfield. If you think this movie doesn't make a whole lot of sense, wait until you hear the plot of the original 1950s Angels in the Outfield. It was about a young woman reporter who blames the Pittsburgh Pirates' losing streak on their abusive manager, who begins hearing the voice of an angel promising to help the team if he changes his ways. And, yeah, when you really think about that, the original movie did not have a very good plot to it. And this one is not that bad, but it's not that great either. I mean, it's funny that we have all these baseball movies coming out, and then around the time that this came out, the big baseball strike happened where they didn't play baseball for over a year, and kind of awkward then, but sadly this movie does not hold up as well as I thought it would. I remember seeing this trailer all over the place when I used to get all the Disney videotapes back then. I mean, they were proud of this movie. They were really looking at this movie and thinking that, okay, we've got something great here, and honestly, I just don't really get it. I mean, I guess for nostalgic sakes, it's not a terrible movie, and honestly, compared to what Disney would do later on down the rest of the 90s with their 90s live-action films, those are much worse, but, I mean, everybody's fine in this movie. You got a young Joseph Gordon-Levitt playing the kid in this. Danny Glover's playing the manager in this. Tony Danza's very good in here. I actually got a copy of this movie autographed by Tony Danza when he was here at Steel City Con a few years ago. Christopher Lloyd seems like he's having a good time here. You get to see the early glimpses into the careers of people like Adrian Brody, Neil McDonough, Matthew McConaughey. Everybody's fine in this. There are a couple funny little one-liners here and there. There is a great moment in the beginning when the baseball players are talking about how they keep throwing the game away, and Danny Glover just loses their mind at them. That's probably my favorite scene in the movie because it's the one I always go back to, especially I live in Pittsburgh, and the Pirates are one of the worst teams in baseball, and that's the one I always go. That's the clip I always go back to whenever they give a game away. And so maybe there is some more stuff here that I actually remember about this movie that I like. I mean, the visuals are fine for the time period. They work for what they're supposed to do. I mean, the overall story is kind of ridiculous. You can see how Disney's trying to add that whimsical and magical factor to this, and it's kind of lazy here. But like I said, going back to it many years after I wrote my initial review for this movie, I will admit that it's a little bit better than I remember it, but it's still not something I would say is a great movie. I mean, for the task that it had to do, trying to modernize the story for a new generation, I don't think it did the best job of it. But seeing as how there's far worse movies that Disney made in the '90s that are really bad movies, this is the least bad that I remember. It's not a great movie, but I'll give it credit though. The more I think about it, I don't hate this movie as much as I thought I did. I mean, it's kind of one of those movies that kind of goes back and forth with me. Some parts of it I like, some parts of it I don't like. It just really doesn't feel. There's just not really a solid place in the middle where I feel like I could say that this is a great movie. I will say it's just an okay movie. It's an okay movie for what it is. It could have easily been a whole lot better, but I mean, like I said, I would rather take this than stuff like Mr. Magoo, Meet the Deedles, That Darn Cat, some of these other terrible 90s Disney movies that we got at the time. So I don't know. Maybe I was a little bit less. Maybe I was a little bit more harsh than I should have been on this. But still, though, Angels in the Outfield, it's a meh kind of movie. It's one I go back to every once in a while, but it's not something I really want to say is a great movie overall. That's pretty much all I got to say about that one. So let's move on to the next movie, and that is David O. Russell's feature film debut, which is Spanking the Monkey. We've talked about David O. Russell's work in the past. I wasn't too very kind of this film that just came out, Amsterdam, which I thought was a terrible movie. Honestly, after Silver Linings Playbook, I think his career kind of dampened a little bit, but there were some good movies, and I've seen almost every one of them, except for a couple of them, Accidental Love and this movie, which is the first movie he did as a filmmaker that kind of got his name out there, and that trailer doesn't really say a whole lot, but then again, it's one of David O. Russell's earlier movies. He was known to have this kind of quirk with his comedies, and I don't know. I kind of see it in there. I need to see the movie for myself to really be sure, but I mean, as far as I know, it could be good. But like I said, I don't really have too much more to say about it because it's one of the few David O. Russell films that I have not seen. So I mean, I'll honestly say it's something that I haven't seen. But maybe one day I'll definitely check it out just to complete the filmography. But so yeah, Spanking the Monkey. Let's move on to a movie that I have seen. It's the re-release. I believe it was the 30th anniversary re-release of Stanley Kubrick's classic war film, Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. The trailers for this were very clever. They were so different. They were so unique and so just of the time period. Like, not even of the time period. Something very different and something very strange. Like, you really didn't get a good sense of what this movie was back then. I would assume you didn't get a sense back then. Obviously, I wasn't alive back then. But, yeah, that's it. Those were pretty good trailers back then. They really gave you a good idea of what to expect. But they didn't really spoil all the big moments for you, which is something that they could have easily done with something like this. But, I mean, Dr. Strangelove, man, what else more do you have to say about it? It's the greatest political satire of all time. Don't Look Up, Go Fuck Yourself. This is how you do a good political satire. This is a friggin' amazing movie, man. I mean, this is such a great film. Directed and written by Stanley Kubrick, one of his best films, featuring a phenomenal cast that includes Peter Sellers, George C. Scott, Sterling Hayden, Keenan Wynn, Slim Pickens, James Earl Jones in one of his earliest film roles. In fact, in his first film role. And just a very stylistic-looking film. This is so unique and different for the time period of 1964. The war room, looks so intense, but also kind of over the top, and it's just a fun movie, man. It's a movie that you can go back to so many times, and it remains one of the most. It's one of those movies that just remains so topical and so satirical, even all these years later, 60 years later. This still remains one of the smartest war comedies you will ever see. It's just such a great movie, man. It's just, I mean, so many classic moments there. The guy riding the bomb down as it explodes. Like, that's a classic scene. Peter Sellers is hilarious in this movie. Just the writing overall is perfect. It's top notch. There's a lot of interesting stories I've heard about this movie. Specifically, one that kind of what makes sense, because they actually were going to do this on test screening on November 22nd, 1963, and of course that was the day that JFK was assassinated, and the film was just weeks away from its scheduled premiere, so they had to push that back as they thought the public would be in no mood for such a film any sooner. And they actually had to re-edit some lines there. Like, Slim Pickens had a line in this movie where he said a fellow could have a pretty good weekend in Dallas with all that stuff, and then they changed it to Vegas. And the assassination was also a reason why the pie fight scene in the movie that was cut ended up getting cut. There was a scene where one of the guys takes the pie in the face, and they said that there's a scene where they go, "Gentlemen, our gallant young president has been struck down in his prime." And actually, no, that was one of the generals who was working for the president at the time. And so they basically cut that part out before preview night. I'm basically reading it off of here so I can say it to you without giving you wrong information. But yeah, I believe it was one of the generals for Kennedy at the time that said, "Our president has been struck down in his prime," and said that the film would have stayed, except that Columbia Pictures was horrified and thought it would offend the president's family, which they were kind of right on that. But I mean, I've seen the scene. It's fine for what it is, but honestly, I think the ending of this movie, the original, is the way it is in the film, works a whole lot better. And really, there's nothing really more I can say about it. This movie is just great fun. So yeah, Dr. Strangelove. And so on that note, we wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies. Next time we meet, we'll take a look at the films of July 22nd, which includes some more notable films, including Susan Sarandon and Tommy Lee Jones and John Grisham's The Client. We also have the feature film version of Lassie, the new version of Lassie produced by Lorne Michaels, and Rob Reiner's Ensemble North, which has a history that is not a good history, but we'll delve into it when we get to the next episode. But until then, thank you very much for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the playlist on the next page, check out the previous episode, and I will see you guys tomorrow for another episode. So thank you for watching. I'll see you next time, and until then, as always, take care.